How the FBI monitors Facebook in the early dawn of the 21st century, before the world understood the weight of digital shadows. A quiet tension began to grow between the guardians of national security and the rising empire of social noise. Facebook, born as a simple college network, swiftly transformed into a vast continent of human confession, a place where memories, hopes, grievances, and fears floated freely without walls, gates, locks, or guards. To the public, it felt harmless, even intimate. But to those who watched history repeat itself in cycles, it became clear that every new technology eventually carried the fingerprints of danger and opportunity. Inside the FBI, in rooms lit only by cold screens and dim ceiling lamps, analysts whispered of a new frontier. A frontier where threats did not cross borders with weapons, but slipped silently through status updates. The agency had spent decades learning to read letters, phone logs, and coded messages hidden in dusty archives. Yet nothing in its long legacy prepared it for a world where millions published their lives every hour. What once required spies, surveillance vans, and careful infiltration could now appear on a timeline at midnight, written by a stranger who never imagined that their casual post might echo inside a government facility. Senior officials gathered behind closed doors, wrestling with a question older than the Bureau itself, a question carved into every era of American vigilance. How much must be seen to keep a nation safe? The internet had become a restless ocean, and Facebook was its brightest, loudest, most unpredictable wave, pulling in citizens, activists, criminals, and foreign operatives under the same blue banner. Every click, every photograph, every late-night confession formed a breadcrumb in a labyrinth of intentions. And within those trails lay both the seeds of innocent chatter and the quiet beginnings of hidden threats. FBI historians warned that moments of great national risk rarely reveal themselves in grand, dramatic gestures, but instead surface first as subtle patterns, small signals that only disciplined eyes can interpret. Thus emerged the idea that Facebook could no longer be viewed merely as a social platform for connection, but as a living archive of human behavior, drifting with clues that might save lives or unleash chaos. Agents debated fiercely, some fearing that watching the public's digital habits would erode sacred freedoms, while others argued that ignoring the platform would echo past mistakes carved deeply into American memory. In these private debates, the Bureau confronted its oldest paradox. Protecting liberty often requires intrusion, yet intrusion, even justified, can erode the very liberty that generations once fought desperately to preserve. And so, with hesitation wrapped in duty, a quiet decision took shape in the halls of federal authority. A decision that would reshape modern surveillance and bind the FBI to Facebook in ways few could imagine. There was no dramatic announcement, no flashing headline, only a subtle shift in the machinery of power, as the Bureau began tracing digital whispers the way its predecessors once traced ink on intercepted letters. The public would sense none of it, not yet, while investigators stepped into this new realm of virtual footprints, searching for the hidden patterns of a future threat in the vast, restless currents of online confession. What began as an experiment soon grew into a silent bond between institution and algorithm, a bond built on hope, suspicion, and the timeless fear that danger always evolves faster than the law. And from that moment on, the story of how the FBI monitors Facebook would no longer be a rumor, but a quiet chapter in America's long struggle to see the unseen without losing itself in the process. In the uneasy years that followed the tragic day known as 9/11, the FBI faced a shifting battlefield, one where enemies no longer relied on physical borders, but moved silently through networks of human chatter. Old case files filled with paper, film reels, and intercepted calls suddenly felt like relics of another age, as agents realized that the next threat might emerge not from deserts or safe houses, but from a laptop glow. It was during this tense era that the Bureau began assembling a discrete team of digital historians and analysts, individuals trained not only in crime patterns, but in decoding the new dialects of online communication. These early pioneers sifted through posts, comments, and late-night rants with the patience of archivists, trying to separate harmless noise from the faint signals that dangerous actors often left behind unknowingly. What made this mission daunting was the sheer immensity of Facebook, expanding from thousands to millions, and soon to hundreds of millions, each user forming a thread in a vast tapestry of unpredictable stories. Agents who once followed suspects on foot now learned to track virtual movements across shifting timelines, mapping digital friendships, hidden groups, and cryptic messages that hinted at plots beneath the surface. One internal report, never released to the public, described Facebook as a living journal of human impulses, a place where fear, anger, bravado, and desperation revealed themselves without the filter of caution. In those early days, mistakes were common, as false alarms often led agents down long corridors of nothingness. Yet each failure taught lessons that would carve the Bureau's approach to social media surveillance forever. A notorious case involved a vague post from a troubled young man in a small Midwestern town. A single line that seemed threatening, but turned out to be the lament of someone drowning in loneliness. The emotional weight of such missteps haunted many analysts, who feared crossing the line of intrusion, but the memory of past intelligence failures pushed them to continue refining their digital instincts. Over time, specialized tools began to emerge, simple at first, almost experimental in design and purpose, created to detect keywords, map clusters of suspicious activity, and flag unusual behavioral rhythms. Yet these tools were only as effective as the humans behind them. And so the Bureau invested in quiet training programs hidden beneath broader modernization efforts. By the mid-21st century's first decade, the transformation was undeniable and irreversible, as the FBI shifted from a reactive approach to a watchful, anticipatory posture across the digital frontier. Every new technique felt like opening a door into uncharted territory, for each discovery of a threat prevented also carried the unsettling knowledge of how much had been seen. Still, inside those guarded walls, a sense of uneasy pride grew among the early digital watchers, for they knew they were building a new branch of American intelligence shaped not by force but by foresight. Their task was monumental, their burden immense, and their victories often invisible to the nation they served. But they pressed forward, convinced that hidden dangers could only be defeated by those willing to see them. As the second decade drew near, the Bureau prepared for a deeper shift that would alter its methods forever, a shift that required cooperation not just with data, but with the very architects of the platforms themselves. And thus, without fanfare, the groundwork was set for the next chapter, the era when Facebook would no longer be a distant source of clues, but a crucial partner in shaping the silent war for digital security. As Facebook grew from a youthful experiment into a digital nation with hundreds of millions of voices, its vast archives of human behavior became too immense for the FBI to ignore or navigate alone for long. Behind closed doors in Washington, senior officials began seeking a bridge between federal vigilance and Silicon Valley, a bridge that would allow investigators to reach into the platform when danger whispered beneath friendly posts. At first, these contacts were hesitant, carried out in small meetings where lawyers outnumbered engineers, each side unsure how much to reveal, how much to promise, and how tightly the Constitution would hold the reins. Facebook's early executives, idealistic and wary, feared becoming an unseen arm of government authority. Yet they understood that the platform's global reach made it a target for criminals, extremists, and foreign operatives. Thus emerged the earliest framework of cooperation, built not through grand declarations, but through cautious emails, establishing emergency channels that allowed the FBI to request user data when imminent harm cast its shadow. Inside Facebook's headquarters, a quiet team of specialists formed, trained to read the language of subpoenas, working long nights to translate digital fragments into information that federal analysts could interpret. These employees, though rarely mentioned publicly, became the silent interpreters between two immense powers, balancing the urgency of national security with the fragile trust of millions who shared their private lives online. Meanwhile, in the Bureau's digital operations units, agents began mapping Facebook's internal structures, studying how friend networks connected, how groups formed, and how hidden pages masked coordinated plots. Not all collaboration was smooth. Tension simmered as privacy advocates challenged the growing alliance, warning that the delicate line between protection and surveillance could fade beneath the pressure of fear. Inside Facebook, younger engineers expressed unease at how the blue interface they built to connect the world had quietly become a terrain where federal eyes searched for threats that users never imagined. Yet moments of real danger often silenced the doubts. Cases where a flagged message stopped a lone attacker, or a rapid emergency disclosure helped agents locate a kidnapped child lost in the chaos of anonymous chatter. These victories, though uncelebrated, forged a deeper sense of duty among those working behind the scenes, persuading both sides that cooperation, however controversial, held the power to save lives otherwise lost. By the dawn of the platform's second decade, the informal bridge had hardened into an established structure, complete with encrypted portals, dedicated teams, and protocols written in the careful language of legal caution. But even as the system matured, a quiet unease lingered, for the more these two giants depended on each other, the more their responsibilities blurred into one. Historians within the Bureau would later describe this era as a turning point, the moment when surveillance no longer required spies in alleys, but agreements in conference rooms. And within the vast machinery of Facebook, where billions of posts moved like shifting tides each sunrise, few users realized how many of their words brushed against the unseen filters watching for signals of harm. This was the age when technology and government, once distant pillars of American life, leaned toward each other, bound by necessity, distrust, and the shared burden of guarding a nation becoming increasingly digital at its core. Yet the deeper this partnership grew, the more it stirred questions too heavy to ignore, questions about oversight, power, and who truly held the keys to the information of an entire world. Those questions, unanswered and unsettling, would erupt into the public sphere in the years to come, as the partnership between Facebook and the FBI stepped into a storm of scrutiny no algorithm could contain. For years, the alliance between Facebook and the FBI existed in quiet corridors, unseen by the public eye. But history has a way of pulling secrets into the light, especially when trust begins to fracture and fade. The first cracks appeared when leaked documents hinted at broader data access than officials had admitted, sparking a wave of suspicion among users who once believed their digital lives were sheltered by privacy. Newspapers across America printed tense headlines, describing algorithms that flagged messages in seconds, and emergency channels that operated with a speed and secrecy few outside government understood. The tone of the nation shifted. Conversations once filled with optimism toward technology grew uneasy, as people realized that the platforms they used to share joy and sorrow had become windows for surveillance. In living rooms and cafes, ordinary citizens questioned whether safety had overshadowed their freedom, and whether the guardians meant to protect them had stepped silently into their personal digital space. Congress soon demanded answers, summoning executives from Facebook and leaders of the Bureau to testify, their words recorded under bright lights as millions watched with a mix of anger, fear, and fascination. Inside the hearing room, lawmakers pressed for clarity on how far the collaboration truly extended, yet every response seemed wrapped in legal caution, revealing little while suggesting far more beneath. Facebook representatives insisted they acted only in moments of imminent harm, guided by strict policies, while FBI officials defended their vigilance as a necessary shield in a world of evolving digital threats. Still, for many, the boundaries felt blurred, lost somewhere between corporate responsibility and federal power. And the more both sides explained, the more the public sensed an unseen machinery turning behind the scenes. Civil liberties groups released reports accusing the partnership of creeping beyond constitutional limits, warning that silent monitoring could erode the democratic foundation Americans had fought to preserve. The emotional weight of these accusations echoed across the country, stirring memories of past overreach, from wartime surveillance to domestic intelligence programs that history would later judge harshly. And yet, amid the rising anger, there remained stories of lives saved by quick intervention, cases where a flagged message or a midnight alert prevented tragedies too painful to imagine. This contradiction, protection entwined with intrusion, left the nation torn between gratitude and fear, uncertain whether the line crossed was a safeguard or a doorway to a future where privacy slowly vanished. Journalists began calling it the new frontier of oversight, a space where law and technology collided, forcing society to confront what it truly valued in an age where information moved faster than regulation. Within Facebook's headquarters, employees whispered about the ethical weight of their roles, wondering whether innovation still belonged to dreamers or had been claimed by national security's shadow. Inside the FBI, agents felt the tension as well, aware that the public now watched their every step, and that each decision, even made in good faith, might later be scrutinized under a harsher light. Thus, the partnership entered a fragile era, no longer hidden, no longer trusted, its every action pulled into a storm of criticism that threatened to reshape its future forever. And as debates thundered through courts, newsrooms, and congressional chambers, one question lingered like a silent warning. Had the guardians of safety become too powerful to be seen, yet too essential to be stopped? As the world stepped deeper into the third decade of the century, the partnership between Facebook and the FBI evolved, shifting from manual reviews and cautious exchanges into a realm shaped by artificial intelligence and prediction. Where once agents read posts by hand, now machines scanned billions of words with tireless mechanical focus, seeking patterns in moods, connections, and digital trails that even seasoned analysts could not perceive. Facebook's algorithms, designed first to personalize feeds and recommend friends, gained a darker reputation, for their ability to map behavior made them invaluable to investigators searching for the earliest signs of threat. Inside government facilities, rooms once filled with paper maps now flickered with glowing dashboards, where clusters of online activity pulsed like constellations, each dot representing a human life behind a screen. The Bureau's digital units describe this new era as watching storms before they form, predicting danger not from what had happened, but from what might emerge in a cascade of shifting signals. Yet with every leap forward, ethical storms grew stronger, as critics warned that prediction blurred into preemption, and preemption threatened to punish intentions before they became actions, a path fraught with moral peril. Facebook engineers felt the weight as well, aware that each line of code they wrote could guide or misguide justice, and that even a subtle algorithmic bias could ripple through investigations, affecting countless innocent lives. These concerns, though debated fiercely, failed to slow the march of technological surveillance, for the world itself had become faster, more volatile, and too vast to monitor through human eyes alone. Behind closed doors, federal and corporate teams refined models that could detect radicalization in early stages, monitor coordinated disinformation, and identify accounts that shifted identities like ghosts across the network. To many inside the system, this felt like progress, unsettling yet necessary, a shield forged in silicon to defend a nation navigating dangers no previous generation had faced. But outside, in the public sphere, unease deepened as users wondered who truly controlled their digital fate, and whether freedom in the modern age was becoming an illusion shaped quietly by unseen algorithms. Historians warned that every empire of information eventually collapses under the weight of its own surveillance, and whispered that even well-intended guardians must face the judgment of time and unintended consequences. In boardrooms and federal offices alike, leaders wrestled with a question as ancient as civilization itself, a question buried beneath centuries of power struggles. How much must be known to keep a society safe? There was no consensus, only the growing awareness that the future would not be defined by laws alone, but by the silent architecture of systems capable of seeing more than any human could ever confess aloud. As the partnership matured, both Facebook and the FBI sensed the approach of a threshold, a point beyond which surveillance would transform from a tool into a force reshaping identity itself. And on nights when analysts stared at swirling data maps that looked eerily like weather patterns of human intent, some wondered if they were still observers, or if they had become participants in shaping the world they watched. This uneasy thought echoed through hallways of steel and glass, lingering like a warning that technology's greatest power might also be its greatest temptation. And so the story returns to the silent question that has shadowed every chapter of this hidden alliance, a question whispered by philosophers, feared by citizens, and studied by historians of power. In a world where every click becomes a clue and every whisper becomes a signal, who is truly watching whom? And when the watchers finally see everything, what part of ourselves disappears into the gaze?